I met my boyfriend 5 years ago on a dating website. We met up for drinks and hit it off instantly. When I told him I didn't want children, he said he was okay with it as he didn't see himself wanting any either. This seemed perfect because it was a deal breaker in many of my previous relationships. The first few years of our relationship was great. We traveled, moved in together, and advanced in our careers. About 6 months ago, my boyfriend told me that he's had a change of heart and wants a family. He said that with COVID and him nearing 35, he's realizing that life is short and wants to be a father. I was shocked by this, but stuck with my position. He begged me to reconsider and at least think of it because he couldn't see his life without me and wanted to have that family with me. I took time to think on it, but no matter which way I put it, it wasn't something that I saw in my life. I don't think I'm responsible enough to take care of another human being besides myself, and there are so many things I want to do in my life that I'd have to put on hold if I was to have children. When I told my boyfriend my decision, I was expecting us to break up. However, he told me that he'd rather have me than have a family because he couldn't see himself with anyone else. He was adamant about this, and I believed him. I'm not on birth control because it affects me horribly, but we always use protection. I missed my period a couple of weeks ago, but they've always been irregular, so I didn't think anything of it. However, I also started having early pregnancy symptoms and decided to take a pregnancy test. It came back positive and I was shocked. At part 2, my boyfriend tried to force me to keep the baby. When he admitted to tampering with the rubber, I was shocked. He told me that he poked holes in it in hopes that I'd get pregnant and I want to keep it. I was horrified and I broke down. Not only was I pregnant when never planning on having children, but it was intentionally done by my partner who I trusted. I told him that I wasn't keeping it and that I was leaving him. This is when he started to guilt trip me and threaten me. I grew up in an extremely religious family, and this is a small reason as to why I don't want children. He knew that my parents are firmly pro-life, and my life would be a living nightmare if they ever found out that I was pregnant and didn't keep it. They always told me that if I was irresponsible enough to have an unplanned pregnancy, then I should be responsible enough to deal with the consequences of my actions. He also told me that he would fight me on it as he should have a say since he's the father. When I told him that I'd tell everyone how he tampered and set me up after knowing I didn't want children, he said that no one would believe me as I have no proof. I called my sister and told her everything. She let me move my things in with her and help me make all the arrangements. My ex took to social media and told everyone that I was refusing to keep his child, getting rid of it against his will. He also called my parents and told them the same. My sister eased the blow and helped me explain everything. Surprisingly, they understood and supported me in my decision. I cut off contact with everyone who didn't support my decision, including my ex. He showed up at my house to try to Storytime about the best thing I saw as a hotel concierge. I'd been working as a front desk agent for about a week. I'm working on a slow afternoon and it's about 7 p.m. when this lady named Libby comes in. She tells me she wants to reserve a room, but only for a couple hours. I let her know that she has to reserve it for a full night due to a hotel policy. She agrees and hands me her credit card. This is where things get weird. As soon as I ask her for her ID to make the reservation, Libby says that she doesn't want her name on the reservation and to use the name of the man joining her later instead. I told her if she's using the room, then I need to put her on the accompanying list, but that only employees would see this. At this point, I'm thinking she's here for a one-night stand and doesn't want the guy knowing her information because she's probably married or something. This theory is further solidified when Libby asks me to make a note in the reservation that if we need to address her by name, then to use a different one that she gives me. She even goes as far as to show me the picture of the guy who will be joining her, takes the key, and goes on her way. About an hour later, mystery dude Jake walks in and gets the other key. Not even 30 minutes after Jake goes up, Libby comes back down and hands me both keys. She says thank you and walks off. This is when things get Part 2 about the best thing I saw as a hotel concierge. So many thoughts were going through my head. First, that was way too fast, even for a quickie. Second, why the heck did she give me both keys? Where is Jake? Third, Libby, please tell me you didn't unalive Jake. My coworker and I are whispering with each other, still trying to figure out what happened because I did not look like a lady who just had a pleasant romp in the sheets. Cue Jake coming down the stairs and, okay, we can breathe, he's not dead. We had a rush of guests, so I couldn't see what happened, but a worker from the valet came over and boy did he have some tea to spill. Turns out that Libby had gone as far as asking the valet guy to park her car in a way where the license plate wouldn't be visible. This is because Jake is Libby's husband. Apparently the alias Libby had given me just so happened to be the name of the girl that Jake was cheating on her with. This woman somehow got her cheating husband to believe that his girlfriend had booked a sweet night at a hotel only for him to show up and find his wife sitting on the bed instead. Then she came down after probably massacring the heck out of this idiot without a hair out of place. The valet brought their cars around as she waited for him to get his sorry ass back to the lobby just so she could extend her hand and demand their house keys from him. Then she got into her car and just drove away. What a legend. This is why you should be careful who you talk to online. When I was 15 and getting into my junior year, I created a Twitter account. I didn't tell anyone my username, including my family or friends. I also didn't upload any pictures or specify my exact location, and I put a different city than where I lived. I had around 30 followers and I didn't follow many people. One evening in October, someone sent me a weird direct message. They had 200 followers and the message read, "Hi, I'm Robin, I just turned 17. I wanted to know if you lived in the city because I'm moving there and I'm going to that high school soon. I'd like to make some new friends." I immediately thought something was wrong because nowhere in my profile did I list my actual town, but I remembered a tweet I made a few weeks ago about buses in which I mentioned my city. I was bored and he was polite, so we started talking. The discussion was mainly about high school teachers and cafeteria food. As it got later in the night, he started asking more personal questions like if I lived far from the school or if I was ever home alone. I never answered these questions because it was too shady for me. The next day we talked again and started bonding. I developed feelings for him over the next few weeks. He was handsome and super kind, which was everything I needed after being bullied for so many years. We had a 2-week vacation in October, and at the end of it is when he finally told me that he would be attending my high school. I was so excited to finally meet him. Part 2 of why you should be careful who you talk to online. He asked to pick a place to meet during the morning break on our first day back to school after break. I was so happy to meet him and told him to join me in the hall. However, when he realized people would be around, he said he'd rather meet me in an isolated place because he might not recognize me in a crowd. It was a good enough excuse for me, and I told him to meet me in the third floor bathroom because we weren't allowed to stay there during breaks and no one would disturb us. In my head, it seemed a little creepy, but since we were in school, I was confident that nothing bad could happen. I dressed up and made myself really pretty and counted down the minutes till we met. When he arrived, it was him. He wasn't a catfish, but he looked a little older than 17. We talked and got along so well, and at the end of it, he asked me to go to lunch with him. I refused because I didn't have money and wouldn't let anyone pay for me. He seemed disappointed but offered to walk me home after class. I told him I have to take the bus, but he could walk me there. This became a routine for another 2 months. One day, I complained about how lonely I'd be at home as everyone in my family was going to be out that day. I know it was reckless, but I thought I could trust him by this point. That evening, he walked me to the bus stop. I waved goodbye and put my headphones in. Little did I know that my life was in danger. Part 3 of why you should be careful who you talk to online. When I got off, I had a weird gut feeling that someone was watching me. Since it was December, it was already dark by the time that I had gotten off the bus. I paused my music but kept my earphones in not to draw suspicion. It was silent in my suburban neighborhood, especially at night. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I knew someone was following me. As quietly as possible, I reached for my keys in my pocket. As soon as I pulled them out, I ran. It was the best and fastest sprint of my life. I somehow managed to open and close the door before he could reach me. I deactivated the alarm and looked through the glass panel on the door. It wasn't a peephole but a whole window, so if someone wanted to see inside the house, they could. Standing there looking at me with the creepiest face was Rob. He followed me home, probably with a car, and I was paralyzed. We stared at each other for a minute before I ran to the kitchen to grab a knife. When I got back to the door, he was still there and started banging. I feared the glass would break, but it didn't. After 5 minutes, he stopped and went around the house banging on every shutter until he came back to the door. He looked angry, but my neighbor's car pulled in and he ran off, probably thinking it was my family. After this, he harassed me online, which finally made me delete my Twitter. No one even knew or heard of him, which was probably why he looked older. I never heard of him again, but I still wonder what could have happened that night.
This is why you should always check your back seat. A woman coming home from work decided to drive home. As she's driving, she notices a black car following behind her. In every red light she stops at, this black car will constantly flicker his lights. She began to panic and drove faster and faster, taking every turn she could to get away from this car. As she's driving, she calls her dad and tells her that this car is following her and to meet her in the driveway so she's not alone. She pulled into the driveway and sees her dad waiting outside. Then she sees the car that's been following her pull in right behind her. The man in the black car behind her gets out of his vehicle and runs to her and says, "Get out of your car now." She gets out and the man behind her says, "There is somebody trying to kill you." The man in the black car behind her pulls out a weapon. He shows the woman that there has been a man in her back seat, and every time he would flash his lights, it was because the man was about to stab her.
I have feelings for my coworker, but I'm engaged. I work in the medical field in a busy hospital. It feels like we've been short-staffed forever and it never seems to improve. This leads to us having to work double shifts almost daily. The money's great, but I'm rarely ever home. Sometimes we even sleep at the hospital and don't go home for days at a time. The people I work with are amazing and almost like family. At the moment, I see them more than my actual family. We all look out for each other and we're super close. But some of us might be a little too close. There's this guy I work with named Jason that I've developed feelings for. When you're with someone almost 16 hours a day, I guess it's bound to happen. The problem is that I'm already engaged to my fiance at home. It started out innocent at first. Casual, light flirting here and there, so subtle at times I didn't even think anything of it. One of those situations where you start out as friends, but things keep progressing. I knew my relationship was in jeopardy when Jason and I started texting when we weren't working. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't stop the conversations. If I'm being honest, at times I would be the one to text first and take the conversation away from the friend zone. I haven't talked to my fiance about it and I'm scared to death too. I still love him and feel terrible that I have feelings for someone else, and I haven't even gotten to the worst. Part 2, I have feelings for my coworker, but I'm engaged. I didn't tell my fiance about Jason because I felt like this was only happening because I was never home. I felt like hardly seeing him had to be the root cause of this mess. I talked to him about making more of an effort to see each other despite my crazy schedule. This worked for a little while, but I still had feelings I couldn't deny for Jason despite trying to suppress them. I even told Jason that we had to keep things strictly professional from now on, to which he agreed. However, this agreement didn't last long. Jason and I were assigned to work in the same area for the next month. One night when we were on break together, he started telling me how much he missed talking to me like we used to. One thing led to another, and we ended up making out in the break room. This was the first time it actually got physical between us, but sadly it wasn't the last. I'm ashamed to say it happened a few more times. At this point, I knew this couldn't keep going on, so I made the decision to break up with my fiance. I quickly found out that this was the wrong choice. Shortly after, I found out that Jason was sleeping with another girl at work. I was crushed and completely cut him off. I realized I made a mistake and tried to reach out to my fiance, but it was too late. I got distracted by what could have been and lost track of something great that I already had. I still regret it to this day. Story time about how I found out my boyfriend was married. I had just moved to a new state and decided to download Bumble to meet new people. One day, I matched with this great guy named Alex. He had a good job, his own house, never married, and no kids. We lived in the same town and we started spending a lot of time together. However, I noticed that Alex started doing some weird things. He started coming over unannounced. Before he left, he would always check to make sure that the doors and windows were locked, and when I wasn't with him, he was always blowing up my phone constantly asking what I was doing. A few months into our relationship, he introduced me to his family and I introduced him to mine. It also turned out that we had a ton of mutual friends. He knew my new best friend Laura and her husband from the gym. When we made the connection, he made it clear that he didn't want me being friends with her anymore. Anytime I would bring her up in conversation, he would get agitated. Laura and I were both teachers at the same school. One afternoon, she came storming into my classroom. She told me that she had just had a girls' night with the girls from the gym. They were all showing pictures of their wedding since one of the girls recently got engaged. That's when she noticed that my boyfriend was in pictures with another woman. It turns out he was the husband of one of the girls that she was having dinner with. Part 2 of how I found out my boyfriend was married. When my best friend showed me the pictures of my boyfriend and his wife, I was livid. I saw red and immediately texted him telling him to come over to my house to talk. He ended up calling me on the way home from work but refused to come over to my house until I told him what I wanted to talk about. When I told him, he automatically started blaming my best friend and her husband for telling his business, saying it wasn't theirs to tell. I felt so angry and betrayed, but most of all, I felt stupid for not knowing. I told him it was over and that I was done with him. I didn't hear from him again after that. He moved away and no one at the gym had seen him either. A few months after everything happened, his wife posted on Facebook saying that she was getting a divorce. It turns out that he had beaten her up so badly that she ended up in the hospital. This abuse had apparently been going on for months. I felt that it was a blessing in disguise that I had gotten out of that relationship. Seeing how controlling he was within just a few months of dating, who knows what would have happened if I didn't find out and kept dating him. Luckily, I haven't seen or heard of him since 2018 and I hope that I never do. This is how a phone call from my mom saved my life. When I was 15, I started working weekends at a skate park over the summer and I was the only female employee there. They'd host a ton of events and rock shows. These events were extremely fun and all my friends would hang out there for a good time, so we got to know the owners pretty well. The two guys who owned the shop were in their 40s, overweight and balding. Their names were Doug and Mark. Doug was married with kids, so he was always more serious about the business and rarely joked around. However, Mark was a single dude who was outgoing and silly. He was always joking around and pretty chill, so we always had a fun time with him around. There were a few red flags that I ignored, such as how Mark came up to me at one of the events and picked me up, tickling me and spinning me around. I awkwardly laughed it off, but I was creeped out. Another time, I noticed him giving me flirty looks and sticking his tongue out at me. It felt inappropriate, but I shrugged it off thinking it was all in good fun. That was until one day when the fun stopped. Mark called me to the back room. Doug was on a phone call in the front, and when I got to the back room, Mark picked me up and set me on a washing machine. This is when he tells me he wants to kiss me. I automatically shut him down. He then tries to persuade me to lift up my shirt for him. Again, I tell him no and hop down, proceeding to walk towards the front, thinking that was it. I had no idea how much danger I was. Part 2 of how a phone call from my mom saved my life. Doug opened the door and asked what we were doing, followed by asking if Mark showed me their butterfly collection. I awkwardly said no and walked out. Around 5 o'clock, Doug asked me to go with Mark to run some errands. All I could think about is how awkward the ride was going to be, as we hadn't talked since the incident. Mark drove us to the other side of town to my high school. We pull in the back parking lot on a Saturday. I asked what we were doing there and he said he was scouting for a new area for a skate park behind the school. He gets out of the car and motioned me to go with him. Then he leads me to an area with dense forest-like woods. He urges me to go with him into the woods, telling me to take his hand to show me the spot. At this point, I'm panicking and debating on making a run for it. That's when my cell phone rings and I quickly answer it. It was my mom and she asked if she could come pick me up early to go to dinner. With a sense of urgency, I tell her, yes, I'm at the high school, come get me now. I think she heard the fear in my voice because she made it there in 5 minutes. I told Mark my mom was on the way and I had to go, and he seemed pissed. He walked with me to the front and didn't say bye. My mom picked me up, asking if I was okay. I was in shock, but said yes. I went straight home and quit that very day. I'm 100% convinced that he was planning to do something terrible to me in those. Storytime about how my roommate tried to steal my boyfriend. When I was 18, my parents told me that I had to move out. I found a really nice apartment that was pretty spacious, but I definitely couldn't make rent on my own. I put out an ad for a roommate and found a girl named Jenny who seemed really put together. When Jenny moved in, everything was fine. We got along well, but didn't overstep any boundaries. When the pandemic hit, my boyfriend started staying over more. Jenny didn't have a problem with this, as we had plenty of room and didn't bother her. Over time, I started noticing little things Jenny would say and do. Whenever my boyfriend came over, she made it a point to wear as little clothing as possible, but when he wasn't there, she would be in full-on PJs. My boyfriend and I had date nights a couple times a week at home. She would invite herself to our date nights and solely focus on talking to my boyfriend the whole time, laughing a little too hard at his jokes. I'm not easily intimidated, so I didn't read much into it, and didn't think that she'd ever actually try anything. One weekend when I was sleeping in, my boyfriend woke me up. He had gone for a jog and was making his post-workout smoothie in the kitchen, and that's when Jenny approached him. Apparently, she told him that he should stay and hang out with her when I went to work instead of leaving when I leave like he usually does. She only got more flirty with him from here. Part 2 of how my roommate tried to steal my boyfriend. My roommate Jenny continued passively flirting with him. One morning, she came into the kitchen wearing one of his t-shirts that we put in the wash the previous night. When I asked her about it, she said she didn't know that it was his and she found it in her laundry basket. She changed and threw the shirt at him with a smile. A few nights later, she sent him a picture on Instagram in her bra and immediately apologized, saying she sent it to him on accident. He quickly sent me the screenshots of the messages. The final straw was when she tried to make a move on my boyfriend one night when I was running late from work. He was waiting for me in my room when she barged in intoxicated. She tried to straddle him and kiss him, but he quickly pushed her off. When I got home and confronted her, she flipped out and started cursing me out. She locked herself in her bedroom the rest of the night and wouldn't come out to talk to me. The next morning, I told her that she needed to move out. The following month, she did, but that didn't stop her from taking a final shot at my boyfriend. She messaged him on Instagram and asked him to come over to her new place. She said she would keep it a secret and would do anything he wanted. Obviously, he showed me and I posted the screenshots of her thirsty ass and tagged her. She got flooded with messages about being a homewrecker and she deleted her social media accounts. Luckily, I haven't heard from her since.
I live in a nice neighborhood with my mom and my dad. My dad works the night shift and my mom always has worked from home. Now, I love my mom. I really do. But she's kind of a dork. She's a little bored at home, so she always picked up weird hobbies. There was refinishing furniture, building birdhouses, raising exotic animals, ghost hunting, you name it, she's done it. The worst part is, she hasn't been good at any of them. That's why when she started acting unusual at first, I assumed she had just picked up a new hobby. But as the days progressed, things got weirder and weirder. My mom started rushing me to go to bed. I mean, I'm 16 years old and she was snapping at me to get in bed at 9. 9! She was fine with it for a while, but soon, she was getting aggressive about it. I told her I couldn't go to bed that early, and she told me I should take some sleeping medicine to knock out. I started locking myself in my room and pretending I was asleep, just to see if I could hear anything that was going on. I always heard voices, a lot of them, but they always seemed kind of distant and hushed. One night, I couldn't stand it, so I walked downstairs to get a glass of water. I could hear the voices a lot more clearly, and it seemed like they were all coming from the basement. My mom must have heard my footsteps because in an instant, she was at the top of the stairs screaming at me to go to bed. I couldn't believe it. She looked so mad, and she had these weird marks on her face that looked like ancient writing or something. That's when I started to feel a little scared. Her hobbies had always been kind of endearing and harmless and dorky. This felt different. For the next few days, I paced in my room trying to figure out what I was going to do. As I passed the window one day, I saw them. A group of adults, all in a line, wearing black cloaks and paint on their faces. They walked through the backyard towards the back door. I dropped to the ground so they wouldn't see me. People in black cloaks entering your house in the dead of night is never a good thing. When I asked my mom about it, oh man, did it not go well. She told me I must not be getting enough sleep if I'm seeing crazy things like that. Then she wanted to take me to a doctor or something because I was seeing things. I know what I saw and she knows exactly what I saw too. The next day, I snuck down while they were in the basement. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to hear something. Anything that would help me understand what was going on. I had to prove to myself that my mom wasn't evil. When I pressed my ear to the door, I could hear everything a lot more clearly. I heard my mom's voice, yelling some really scary things. She talked about how she was the one people should be worshiping. She was the chosen one, the one with the power. I fell away from the door horrified. I couldn't listen to anymore. Was my mom leading a cult? I'd never heard her say anything like that before in my life. She sounded so confident, so angry. She sounded like a cult leader. And for the first time, I was really actually scared of my mother, who I used to think was so sweet and innocent. I ran up to bed. I had to tell Dad. I had to get more proof. I had to do something. First, I had to go in the basement. Mom went grocery shopping the next morning, and that was my chance.